Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today in this video, well, ignoring all the changes to the game room, I, again, can't leave things alone. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a really neat, interesting little project that came about from a spur-of-the-moment question asked on Usagi Electric's Discord, and it quickly spitballed into a full-fledged coded project that's available on GitHub, which, again, I find it interesting and neat, so hopefully you guys will too, especially if you can find a use for this bit of what could be considered a very niche project. So let's get into it and see what I'm even talking about. So a little bit of clarification here. Quite a few months ago when I was backing up a bunch of video files and projects from my editing computer to my NAS, I kind of was in awe that even though, yes, everything in my home network is gigabit, I was able to copy and transfer files to my NAS relatively quickly without the use of flash drives or SD cards. And in fact, with a properly set up home network, whether you're a content creator or you're just a data hoarder or you have, a whole bunch of movies that you ripped or whatever the case may be, having a set up home network that you can have a centralized NAS is a godsend. You can copy files to and from computers without using any extra hardware. For example, I can copy video clips and stuff from my capture PC here to my NAS and then basically walk upstairs and copy stuff from the NAS to my editing computer. I can copy files from projects from my laptop to my desktop and vice versa. My wife can back up photos and stuff from her laptop to the NAS. It makes things so much easier, and it really does save on having to have dozens of flash drives and stuff sitting around and having to make sure you have the right enough space on them to be able to copy and transfer stuff. And it just makes things a lot easier. And while I was doing this, I kind of realized, hey, having a secondary NAS for the vintage computers could be really useful. Kind of a retro vintage style NAS that you can network up a Windows 98, 95, Windows 3.1, maybe a DOS PC, Windows XP, Windows 7 like behind me, maybe the iMac G3s and the PowerMac G4s. Have just a centralized thing for all those computers to share files with each other from a central location. And yes, this kind of stuff has been done before. It's not a new idea or nothing, but it just, to me, thought it was a really neat idea. Make a second NAS with some hardware. My problem was I was a bit of a dork, and I kind of was wanting this to be made out of vintage hardware as well. I was thinking Pentium 3, Pentium 4, and a 4U, 2U chassis, some vintage beige model server chassis set up right on top of my main NAS and have them all networked together. And the main problem with this, there's really not a lot of operating systems out there that are meant for this type of thought process. And that's mainly because there's a lot of different protocols and stuff in place that would prevent certain types of file sharing. And yes, it could be done with a lot of tweaking and hacking, but I quickly realized this was going to be a way out of the realm possibility. However, that thought process snowballed into the next thought process. Even though there's different protocols for file sharing from Windows to Mac to Windows 95, 98, there's different protocols for these computers. I also realized that, hey, a lot of these computers, with the exception of DOS machines and the Amigas and that kind of stuff, can all basically connect to the internet using Ethernet adapter cards. And those things are pretty plentiful. And well, my thought was, hey, what if there was a retro style web server that could be self-hosted, air-gapped from the main internet itself, that all these vintage computers could connect to, whether using wireless cards or using a vintage router, using vintage Ethernet connection cards like ISA or PCIe, PCI, or PCI, even PCIe. Just a neat little central retro style web server that all these things could access using Safari, Netscape, Internet Explorer. Unfortunately, I couldn't find much information on this, much like with the retro NAS idea. So I turned to Usagi Electric's Discord and I asked the simple question. I said, hey, does anyone know of a project that's out there that's turnkey or something that, well, somebody who really knows nothing about networking at all can set up and have kind of just a vintage style web server? Again, I'm not very good with coding or anything like that, so that's kind of why I was asking if anybody knew of anything. I kind of figured it had been done before. And after talking to a couple people, realistically, there wasn't such a turnkey web server system. There just wasn't. There really wasn't a need for it, and well, and thus there really wasn't one. And I kind of thought, well then, hey, I'll just start digging into how to make my own web server, like using Apache or something like that. You know, something I could just tinker with and mess with. And in a weird little twist of luck, one of those guys actually decided to take it upon themselves to code this thing, just out of the blue. So huge thanks goes out to, and I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong, Lisair. I actually don't know how to pronounce your name, and I apologize for that. I'm going to post the name right here. Now, he posted on GitHub a really simple retro isolated web server. The idea was you would run this thing on a Linux installation, like Linux Mint or Ubuntu or something, and using command line, launch this web server, and then just hook other computers up to it using a network switch, and you'd be able to just use vintage internet browsers to connect to it, because it would act as a centralized web server. So I decided to try it out, and that's what I have right here. This is a Optiplex 3020. It has 4 GB of DDR3 RAM, a 320 GB mechanical hard drive. Yeah, I know SSD would have been better, but honestly, considering that most of the computers that are going to be hooked up to this thing won't be pulling data off that fast, and honestly, it's only going to be 1, maybe 2 computers at max doing it. This has an installation of the Linux Mint and the Python code that he put up on GitHub. I will link everything down below if you want to try this out yourself. Now, I will say that this is a kind of an indie spur-of-the-moment project, and from what I've been testing with it on my Windows 7 machine back here, it looks like a retro web page, and honestly, it looks amazing and functions perfectly for what I was thinking. So I do have it set up already on this tower here, which is a perfect also use case for keeping e-waste out. You know, just little light, low power machine here that's going to be hosting a isolated web server for my home network here. It's goofy, it's silly, and there's probably better ways to do it. But this, once everything's hooked up correctly in terms of the end user, like Windows 98 machine, Windows 95 machine, the whatever machine I hooked up to it, once that stuff's all set up correctly, realistically, I wouldn't need to use CDs or floppy drives or try to track down specific types of USB drives that Windows 98 can use, or even zip disks. You know, just download it off the internet at blazingly fast 10/100 speeds, or gigabit, I guess, in the case of Windows 7 here, because this does have a gigabit output. So technically, this web server will be operating at gigabit speeds, which is far faster than most machines back then would have been capable of seeing. So let's get this thing powered up, and I'll show you how it works, and then we will start working on my Windows 7 tower here. So let's get going with it. And I apologize for my desk being a huge mess here, but the neat thing is it is just dead silent. Keyboard not found, that's fine, it'll still auto boot. And yes, this will take a little bit to load up in the middle of Linux Mint because it's a mechanical hard drive, but like I said, this is it's just for vintage drivers, vintage like screensavers, vintage ISO files and stuff like that, you know, burning them to CDs or writing them to USBs and that kind of stuff. It just takes a lot of time and stuff like that. So this, just being able to start up a Windows 95 machine or whatever, launch Internet Explorer and just download it from this thing would be actually in some ways a lot faster. So Lisair, and I'm probably, again, butchering your name. I'm sorry, dude. Originally tested this and built it to run off of Linux-based operating systems. He has not tried to use this on Windows yet, and I'm not going to try and install this to Windows or nothing. I'm just going to use Linux Mint. This little PC here, I was trying some Linux Mint stuff on here anyway for a video that it's not going to come out. It just didn't. I didn't like the way it was. It didn't look right, so whatever. But anyway, so this is Linux Mint, which is a very easy, low-spec operating system. It works perfectly with older mechanical drives and DDR3 RAM and older, I think this is a 3rd Gen i3. And you see I have 2 folders here, and that's because this first one here was the first one I did when he first created this and released it onto GitHub. And then since then, he's released a kind of updated version. They're basically identically the same, and they launch the same and all that kind of stuff. It's just, just this one's got a few more tweaks to it, I think. But we're going to use the original one here. So we're going to open the web server folder. And when you download the stuff off of GitHub, there's 4 files: the page file HTML, the file page modern.js, the plain viewer.html, and the server Python script. And And then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to create a folder. I've needed applications because the documentation kind of mentions it needing it to be labeled applications. And then I've just copied a bunch of stuff here from my NAS off of a flash drive, and I copied it into this folder. I have a music, which is some of the music I use on my YouTube videos. I have some retro games, benchmarks, ISO drivers. So there's some stuff here that could really be useful for vintage machines that, you know, writing them to floppy all the time and or CDs is just kind of a hassle sometimes. I'm gonna right click, open in terminal. And how to start this is you need to type in Python 3 and then server.py. That'll launch the server Python script. That's 8000, which is the port it's going to be forcing this thing to be launched at. And then -B, no idea what that means. And then we're going to type in applications, which is the folder it's going to launch all the data from. And it is case sensitive, so you know, if you decide to tweak this and try to make it something else, it has to be case sensitive. All right, serving HTTP on 0.0.0.0 port 8000, localhost port 8000, document root HTML JS.css. So now the server is running. And how it should look is, if I open Firefox here, browse the World Wide Web. And it takes a second because now it's running this, which is taking up a core. So, all right, and check this out. This is a very retro looking web page from something you could have seen like in the 90s. Everything's squared and blocky and got the drop shadow. Oh, it looks awesome. And you can see all the folders I have made separate file names here. So yeah, retro.serve, welcome to retro.serve, browse and download files from a web server. It's very, very retro style. And check this out. There's a button over here that says plain viewer. Retroserver.wayback. This makes it look like very old school text only based file download sites. It's amazing. So yeah, I can click on music and I have one of the soundtrack MP3s that I use for some of my videos sometimes. We have retro games. I got just DOS games, Mac games. I got some, not sure why Skyrim's in its own separate folder. I'll have to fix that. You got tech demos like Matrox. Yeah, this is a perfect use case for vintage machines. A web server that they can just connect to. Now, obviously, yes, this is running off of the host machine itself, so it's really quick. So we're gonna hook it up to my Windows 7 machine here and show it working. Okay, so you can see behind me, no, the Windows 7 computer is not connecting to the web server. I don't know what exactly is going on. This was all working a month or two, I think 3 months ago, I think. I don't remember how long it's been since Lysair put this on GitHub and I tried it out originally. I told him it was working. I told him that it was working on Windows XP, Windows 7, and I think I told him Windows 98, I believe. It was working just fine. But for whatever reason, now it's completely not. So with how this is supposed to work is you go into Linux Mint's networking settings and you force it into IPv4 mode with a manual IP address. I have this one set to 192.1.1.0 with a gateway mask of 255.255.255.0. And what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to go into the manual configuration of Windows 7, XP, 98, OS 9, OS 10, Safari, whatever, and set a manual IP4 address, because this doesn't support IP, the server doesn't support IPv6, just IPv4, and no HTTP, no HTTPS, no secure. It's just HTTP, like the old 90s way of doing it. You're supposed to set up a manual IP address on the client side, which is Windows 95, Windows 7 here, to 192.1.1. whatever, somewhere between 1 and 254. And same thing with the gateway mask, have that be 255.255.255.0. And then it should just force it into manual mode and just connect. And it did connect a couple months ago. I had the Windows XP, I had the Windows 7. They were networked basically together using a small little switch with this. I tested it out, everything was working. and now nothing's working, which is weird. But the thing is, I don't think it's the web server itself. I'm going to try one more computer that's down here. Not vintage or nothing. It's a more kind of modern-ish, but I just want to see if I can get this thing to access the web server and prove it's something wrong with Windows here, which doesn't make sense because, yeah, the project was meant to host on Linux, not Windows. Windows shouldn't care because it's connected to it as if it's the internet. It should think this is an internet site. So we're gonna try one more thing. This is it's kind of frustrating. Okay, so I've also got hooked up to my capture PC here, which is, yes, also running Linux Mint. But again, the client side of this shouldn't matter. And I have it completely off of my network. In fact, I want to show wireless is off. I'm on wired connection, network connections. We are at Ethernet wired connection 1, which is hooked up to this with it's a 10100 Linksys switch. It's what I've been using for testing this whole thing, and it's not the switch side. I know it's not. Okay, so we're going to go to Firefox. Okay, and we are completely offline here in every way, shape, or form. So we're going to go to http://192.1.1.0 port 8000. It's working. And as proof of this, and as a little bit of proof, over here we have the terminal for the server that's running, and I have right here, if I was to go to click on, say, music, 192.1.1.100, which is this, access to get application /music/retro. So it's working. So if we open this, it plays one of the songs I use for some of my YouTube videos. We go back here. Let's try retro wallpapers, Adele background, and we can even go to videos where I have one of my videos on here is just a test bed thing, and you can see it's working just fine. So the web server is perfectly working. Okay, so as you can probably see and tell, this video is not going nearly the way I wanted it to. I was really wanting to show this thing working with, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 98. It was working a few months ago. I don't know what is going on now because it was all working. I had 3 computers side by side, basically all doing different things off this thing, and it was running perfectly. So I don't know if between then and there I must have changed a setting or changed something, but yeah, something's broken. I have no idea what it is. Clearly though, it's not the web server, the host project here. It works flawlessly. And now that I know it fully works flawlessly, because I have the host machine here, which is broadcasting the web server, connected to a old Linksys 10100 switch, connected to my Linux machine, and it works perfectly. It's able to access stuff, and it accesses stuff quick, which is pretty nice considering that, again, the fastest this switch is running is 100 megabit. Given the time frame of a lot of the machines that could be hooked up to it, if everything was working correctly, is actually pretty fast, because most internet, during the time a lot of these machines were being used, weren't even close to hitting gigabit, and that 100 megabit was still the de facto standard up until just a couple of years ago. So obviously, if you can imagine how fast this host machine would work as a web server if it was connected to a gigabit switch, it'd be outstanding. Which is, yeah, I wanted to have this thing deployed into my janky server rack and start hosting a little web server, not on the internet. I should have mentioned this before. This is not a secure project. There's no security protocols anywhere within that Python code. Do not expose this machine to the internet right now. This is basically a self-contained, self-hosted web server. It is not something you want to connect to the internet and try and use or have people connect to, unless you're a masochist and you really, really are not trusting of people, which I don't know anybody who's that trusting. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to have this thing set up and deployed on my server rack, and start slowly branching out and connecting all these machines up to it using Ethernet jacks and cables and PCIe cards, and get a little, basically a little vintage network going, which, yeah, that's the end goal eventually, if I can figure out what the heck's going on with Windows XP 7 and whatever else I'm trying with this. Because, again, as a host machine, it is working. And on the client side, the Firefox and the machine over here, it is connecting to it and pulling data off it perfectly, which is just amazing for what amounted to a question that I asked on Usagi Electric's Discord of, hey, does anybody know if there's a project like this? And if there is one, let me know. I'd love to try it out. And somebody just went off and did it, which is just amazing. I wish I could even think about being able to code Python or anything that quick. That is actually stupidly amazing. So again, this whole video, huge shout out to Lysair on Usagi Electric's Discord for creating this neat little project, and he did post it and upload it to GitHub. So if you want to try this project out for yourself, I will put a link to it down in the description field. And you can try it out for yourself if you want to see if you can get this thing to fully work. And if you do, let me know what you did in your Windows 7 and XP internet connections to get it to work. And hopefully here in the future, I will be able to get this thing fully working and show it working with a plethora of screens showing it accessing different parts of that hard drive with Windows 98, XP 7, and I do want to try it more thoroughly with Safari with a Power Mac G4 and iMac G3, because I think getting all those things networked together would be really, really neat just to see it happen. And yes, one of the things is that I do want to mention, this is partially what I wanted to do with that 24-port Netgear switch that I mentioned in my network vlog video. I want to set a dedicated VLAN of just 8 ports, where this is going to be self-hosting a web server for those other 12 or 11 ports, so I can connect all these vintage machines up off of one switch. Not sure that's ever going to work, but like I said, I need to get this diagnosed first and figure out what's going on. It's not the host, it's not the program, it's not the software, it's not the web server, it's the client side that's not working, which is irritating because, like I said, it was working a few months ago. Anyway, with that being said, thank you all so much for watching this video. Really hope you enjoyed it, even though it did not go nearly how I scripted it to go. If you have any thoughts or comments about this little project, if you want to check it out, it is going to be down on the GitHub. If you kind of might know what the heck's going on with Windows 7 settings here, because I have it set as a manual IPv4 with a different IP address than what the host is having. And for whatever reason in the network settings, it keeps trying to say it's a public network and it will not even connect to the switch. Like that's where the triangle is. It stops between the switch and the Windows 7 tower here. Same with Windows XP, it says the exact same thing. It will not connect to the switch, which should be the gateway. But it's weird because the capture PC does. So clearly the switch is working, and all my patch cables I'm trying with this thing are working. So if you have any ideas of what could possibly go wrong there, put down in the comments, because I do want to show this thing working in a future video. So that being said, again, thank you all so much for watching this video. Please check this project out if it interests you and show it some love, because honestly, obviously whatever wrong with my end here is not indicative of the project itself. It could be a really useful project, especially for retro content creators and retro enthusiasts who just don't want to keep using flash drives and CDs and floppies and zip disks to transfer files between mid to late 90s and even early into the 2000s retro computers that really can't be hooked up to the internet anymore. So be on the lookout for more projects involving this and other networking stuff. Be on the lookout for some more future computer content and some video game stuff. And I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.